Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the State of the Arrowverse. I am Jim Biscardi, and I am joined by Nicole Drum and Jenna Anderson, two of the best people covering the CW DC universe as you know it at Comicbook.com. We figured they're not going to be at ComicCon this year, so we're still going to talk about it because there is so much that has happened over even just the last couple of months, given everything that's gone on with the coronavirus and production schedules being shifted left and right. There's still a lot happening with our favorite DC shows. And so we're going to break it all down. We want to give you a quick look that's basically everything you need to know to, one, be up to speed when these shows hit, but also answer probably some questions that you've been thinking about. How is all of this going to change? I mean, it's crazy to think for me that the CW and Warner Brothers put together an event like Crisis, right, in which just, I think, blew everyone's expectations kind of out of the water. And then, kind of reset the playing field that all, where all the Earths are and where everyone is, and then go dark. Right? And so I think what we'll do is, obviously we're going to go through Batwoman and Flash and Legends, all of those shows. But first, I think it's probably the best place to start is with Batwoman. And so the biggest news out of Batwoman is that Ruby Rose is no longer playing Kate Kane. And in fact, a new character is going to play Batwoman, and that is going to be played by Javicia Leslie. Who wants to break down basically what went down, and then we'll jump into like who this character is and how it's going to affect the show? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in since Batwoman's kind of my main steez. So literally days after the season finale, which even then was a de facto season finale because they had 2 episodes that were unfinished due to the pandemic. Literally days after that aired, it came out that Ruby Rose was stepping down from the show. And then in the months since then, it's kind of been this question over the fandom of like, how do you replace Kate Kane? Because unlike Batman and Flash and even somebody like Green Arrow, there isn't necessarily somebody for Kate to give the mantle to in the comics. And so this is kind of like completely uncharted territory. And so everyone was like, who is this new character going to be? And like, what is the significance? Or like, are they just going to recast Kate? And so then as soon as Javicia's casting was announced, I have seen... It's okay. I have seen so many people kind of embrace the show and give it this whole new significance that it didn't necessarily have in the first season of like a Black bisexual woman playing this beloved superhero and just kind of the significance of that.
One of the cool things I don't think any of us expected with this show was for it to really dive into the Batman of it all with Bruce Wayne, and sure enough we got Tommy Elliott and Hush and that whole thing. Like, that was bananas, but it left on a pretty big cliffhanger.
Yes.
So where does it go from there?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that because like so much of that cliffhanger relied on Bruce being able to, or Tommy as Bruce being able to kind of like con Kate into getting kryptonite. And so it's like now that Kate's not there, you could kind of back like on the fact that Luke had this established relationship with Bruce and that he would recognize him to an extent. But I don't know how that cliffhanger is going to even play out now that the status quo of the entire show has changed.
Do you think we will see more of this show dip its toe into Batman waters? And if so, is that the right move?
I'll let Nicole kind of chime in because she's the Batman.
I am the Batman person. Generally speaking, I don't think we're going to necessarily see them dipping more into Batman, largely because the Bruce Wayne Batman of it, as Jenna said, does tie directly to Kate. She's family. She's also got his mantle. She's basically taken over his company to an extent. I think when we lose the Kate Kane piece of it, we lose that tie. And I think in a sense it's going to be very helpful for the show taking this new direction with this new character who is original and different, and they're not going to necessarily be weighed down by the Batman of it all. I mean, realistically speaking, Batman is possibly one of the most popular and if not the most recognizable character across comics and in other media as well. People who don't know comics know who Batman is. And so saddling a new character and a new actor with a lot of Batman of it all, I think the show is going to steer away from that. That said, considering that it appears that Kate is going to go missing, much as Bruce and Batman have, I do think we'll see some elements weaving into it. And on top of that, this new Batwoman's still probably going to inherit all of Gotham's bad guys, who are also all of Batman's bad guys. So we'll still see some tethers here and there. I don't think it will dip into it as heavily as perhaps we would have seen had Ruby Rose continued as Kate Kane. I think it's the right choice.
Cool. All right, let's jump to The Flash. The Flash had its own bit of a casting shakeup over the last couple of months. This one, much worse because, obviously Hartley Sawyer was removed from the show due to just terrible stuff. If you want, you can go check it out on Comicbook.com. But I think it's if they choose to if they decide to replace his character, it's not as hard as one may think.
Correct.
But does the show still need that character?
That's a good question. I would honestly say, if you're thinking in terms of The Flash, does The Flash need any characters other than The Flash? And to a certain extent, no. But one of the things that the CW has done very well, that to some extent is controversial among fans, is it's made it very much a team element of a show. So everyone has an important role. And just given where the season 6 storyline was headed before it also got a de facto season finale, Ralph played a big role in that. We were looking at, as fans saw, they dealt with the Mirror Master, Mirror Mistress situation only for it to turn out to Iris is still missing, and oh look, Sue Dearborn is being framed. And so that was going to carry on to it. So do they still need the character? Needs a strong term, but I think in terms of the way they've established the dynamic of the team and gotten people really invested into that storyline, there's definitely a strong leaning towards it's probably a good idea to continue to have something of it, at least to resolve that element of things. In a lot of ways, the Barry-Ralph friendship was becoming a very central part of the show. We saw a lot of that. And I think it would be kind of a gap if they were to suddenly pull that back entirely. It's going to be kind of a fine balance to maintain that team family situation while also letting go of that character.
Jenna, thoughts?
Also, it's Ralph is a much easier character to recast because he can chronically change his appearance and his voice to kind of get into various situations. And so they can very easily just be like, hey, I now look and sound like this, and there's no other reason for you to really acknowledge it. You can just move on. And I agree. I think I'm a huge fan of the Ralph and Sue relationship, and I really like how they've played with it in season 6. And I obviously, just from a personal standpoint, want that to continue. And so I do think there's kind of there's this huge gap in the show if you suddenly completely remove Ralph from that.
Let's talk about where season 7 goes. I mean, obviously season 6 ended prematurely, and I know that there were obviously plans to tee up season 7, but now given what we know, what do we think, and where is season 7 going to go?
I think based on everything we've seen with season 6, and again, they're kind of playing things a little close to the vest that we don't really know, but there are two things that stick out that we didn't really get to see resolution to in season 6. One of them is Reverse Flash and what is going on with the Harrison Wells of it all, and the other being Iris being trapped in a mirror dimension. And I think those two things are going to have very heavy impact on season 7, at least in terms of long-term storytelling, because the Reverse Flash is always going to be a central element to the Flash because that's his nemesis. That's the big thing. But on top of that, something Eric Wallace said in an interview with us during season 6 is that the impacts of the mirror dimension is going to be long going for Iris. It's not going to be something she gets over easily. So I think that's going to kind of, to a certain extent, inform season 7 as well.
All right, let's move on. Let's go to Black Lightning, which, this one's pretty interesting because this one I feel of all of the shows is the one that feels the most like a new show. Not a new show in the sense that, we don't know who any of these characters are, right, or whatever, but just given where Black Lightning has been left and kind of the doors that have now been opened, especially with him now being a member of the Arrowverse Justice League, I feel like can set up a ton of stuff.
Absolutely.
What do we think we're getting there?
Honestly, Black Lightning, of all the shows in the Arrowverse, it has kind of a big blank slate. The way season 3 for that show wrapped up, they resolved a huge swath of their stories, left just enough mystery going forward. And I think they've set things up to where we could see a lot more kind of integration with the Arrowverse in terms of opportunities for team-ups, opportunities for stories that have a larger impact. One of the things that's interesting about Black Lightning is that up until its introduction to the Arrowverse, it had very much a contained story and a contained universe. And now that's kind of been blown out of the water. And to be honest, we do have so much opportunity with that show. I think we're going to probably see more of an exploration of the concept of superheroes and metahumans outside of Freeland, just where things left off with dealing with the ASA and exposing their wrongdoing, the terrible things they were doing to Freeland. On top of that, I think we've got a very interesting situation where, because the show is filmed in Georgia as opposed to Vancouver, we may not see the integration kind of in the same way. So what I think we have a real potential seeing is a show that is more topical to current events going into the next season. Black Lightning at its heart has never shied away from issues of racial inequality, police brutality, injustice, and systemic issues of racism. That is very much where that show's wheelhouse is. And I think that we're now going to see an opportunity for that to be done on a larger scale, and one that could theoretically incorporate the bigger heroes of the Arrowverse to tell a much more relevant story and kind of help bring some of that real world relevance to the larger Arrowverse. Also, we get more Wayne Brady as Gravedigger, from what I understand, which is pretty great, because he was actually did a fantastic job. I think a lot of people were incredibly surprised, not only by that casting, but that character choice, and it was actually one of the biggest highlights of the season.
Yeah, all right. Let's go to Supergirl, and then after Supergirl, we're going to hit Legends up. Supergirl. Here's what I'll say about Supergirl. John Cryer as Lex Luthor has been has been such a delight and a surprise, I think, for me, that it's so funny, because it's an instance where he brings a little something to that show that I think that for me, I think the show has been missing a little bit, but I love what that entire cast has been able to do this season to really just move the narrative forward, because I really thought that Supergirl dragged a little bit in places, and this past season I thought was just boom, 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 and I'm excited more than ever to see where it goes. What's the deal there?
Well, what's interesting about Supergirl is it also has kind of been given a little bit of a blank slate-ish, thanks to Crisis, because it was a Arrowverse show that was outside the Arrowverse in the sense it was on a different Earth. Now it's in there. So not only do you have it finally combined with the rest of the world that everybody knows and loves, but you've also kind of dealt with, like you said, it's a little bit of a slower show in places. It drags at times because it's also very topical. Like Black Lightning, it kind of approaches some real world issues in an interesting way through a different lens. And in many cases, Supergirl approaches it through a social justice or a feminism lens, which you would kind of expect for the character.
Sure.
John Cryer's Lex Luthor literally gives you the balance of that, because he is the corporate evil. He is this at times mustache twirling villain. There's humor there that the show doesn't have. And what's really interesting about Supergirl, and again, it was impacted by the coronavirus production shutdown, and it's left us in a place where we got something that I don't think even John Cryer as Lex Luthor expected, where the villain is currently on top. And that presents a whole new set of storylines, because we don't really often see in the Arrowverse where the villains are actually genuinely successful. And one of the things about Supergirl's most recent season is that's exactly what we've got. Lex Luthor was successful. He manipulated the recreation of the universe. He is a good guy on all of that. So I think we're in a situation to where we have an opportunity to really, really lean in a little bit more to just how nefarious villains can be when no one knows they're the villain. And I really, really hope that's kind of where things go going forward.
All right, let's move to Legends of Tomorrow. This is Legends of Tomorrow to me, and it's so crazy because it's been on for a couple of seasons now, but still feels like the Arrowverse's best kept secret, in that it is far and away probably my favorite show of all of these shows. And I think it's just because that cast and how they relate to each other is just kind of like, it's just like one big dopey family that I just love so much. But also too, like my favorite aspect of that show has been the growth of Sarah Lance as basically leader of that team. So let's check in with that show and kind of go from there. There's a few little interesting nuggets about this, especially when you consider Ryan Choi and Constantine and all of that. So let's hop right into it, because we got to keep this train a moving.
Well, so the biggest thing going into the next season is that Sarah has been abducted by space aliens. So that kind of...
Because why not?
Yes, exactly.
Aliens.
Yeah, aliens. Just the ancient aliens guy. So it completely changes the kind of course of the show. I feel like they're going to... They could still deal with time travel, but now in this more sort of cosmic, bizarre alien context, which I think is really interesting. They're supposedly going to introduce a new character who believes they've been abducted by aliens or is just crazy. And so it's kind of a question for the other team members to figure out. And yeah, like one of the strongest things about Legends has been its rotating ensemble and people kind of coming and going as they see fit. And I think going into next season, it's like you should bring in Ryan Choi after how great he was in Crisis. And now that Ray Palmer has left the show and they kind of have dealt with the emotional trauma of all of that, it's like Ryan could definitely come in and kind of help them deal with aliens in the perfect scenario.
I think the biggest one that we need to touch on before we jump to the thing is obviously the Constantine of it all, because clearly Warner Brothers has big plans for John Constantine, and whether or not that means what that means for John Constantine in Legends of Tomorrow is still to be seen. But we know HBO is interested in doing Justice League Dark. You can't do Justice League Dark without John Constantine. What's so crazy to me about this is that there is still a world where John Constantine in Justice League Dark could still be Matt Ryan. Like, here is a guy who had his show on NBC, right? And that had a huge cult following, disappeared. Fans were crying, more and more and more and more for more content. He shows back up in the Arrowverse. The crowd goes wild. He gets a permanent team spot on Legends of Tomorrow. This is an actor-character combination who clearly the fans love and has the chops to do it. Do we think Matt Ryan's Constantine is long for this world, or will they just end up recasting?
I have not really thought about the Justice League Dark of it all, because I still feel like that's so early on, and who knows who they're going to cast. But like when it comes to him on Legends, I am still amazed that we have gotten him as a series regular on the show for this long, and that he still is such a permanent fixture on the show. I think it's great. I am down for more Constantine in any context, regardless of whoever is playing him. And so obviously multiple iterations of a character can exist at the same time, but there is always the question of, are we kind of nearing the end of his time on the show because of all these projects, or is he just going to keep being on the show? I have no idea at this point.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, is that even with the time travel, conceit of the show, magic played a pretty big part in and of it all. Now, if the show is going more cosmic, I think that is really a nice, clean exit for John, even though I would love to see John mix it up with crazy aliens. I mean, don't get me wrong, that would be phenomenal. But if we're looking to rotate some characters in and whatever, I can totally see this being the last stop for Matt Ryan, as heartbreaking as that may be. All right, with that, let's jump to some of the newer stuff, and then we will get out of here. Superman and Lois, which is a show that I think took some people by surprise, mainly because the general theory is that Warner Brothers has no idea what to do with Superman. But they figured it out, and they figured it out on in the Arrowverse shows. And I personally can't wait for another Superman show to be on TV, especially with this Lois.
Yes.
Who wants to jump into it?
Oh my gosh, I think we could both probably jump into it, I mean, honestly. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This show is very exciting. One of the things that's very exciting about this is, like you said, this Lois is such a treat. And it's going to be very exciting to see how this plays out. What I'm personally interested in is that this is going to be kind of in keeping with, I feel like, some of the newer, in quotations, direction for the CW with the Arrowverse shows. And there's going to be a lot of family-oriented aspect of it, which is perfect for a Superman story. It's Clark and Lois and their kids. We're going to be seeing a new General Lane, who's recast from Supergirl, Lana Lang and her family, someone called the Stranger, and it's going to be looking at the concept of superhero families on a lot of levels and what that looks like. I mean, we're dealing with, a big surprise that we're going from having one small child in crisis to suddenly there's two of them, and they're apparently a little older than what we remember. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see. In a sense, it almost feels like a natural extension. The shows are not connected anyway, but it feels like a natural extension of Smallville in a sense. Mm-hmm. And that we're finally getting to see a family man Superman, which I think is a take that we don't often get to see enough on the big screen. We see early parts of his relationship with Lois. We see him as an established hero, but we never really get to see the family element of it. And quite frankly, I'm excited at the concept and just the general things that we have heard about it so far. So.
Awesome. All right, let's jump to Green Arrow and the Canaries, the show on this list that is currently not a show right now, but we have heard, promising things from the CW has said that this show is very much alive. They just have not been able to find a production slot for it, which, given everything that's going on, duh. But if this show does get the green light, can we give folks here a up-to-speed glance at what they will expect if the show makes it to the air?
Well, so the show would follow Arrow's two iterations of Black Canary, and then it would follow Mia, Oliver, and Felicity's daughter in the future, and kind of their attempts to both navigate the post-crisis future and figure out how to save their version of Star City from getting completely destroyed. And I personally, as a Black Canary super fan, I am very excited by the idea of more Black Canary on TV. Plus, Katie Cassidy's version of Laurel has always been like a highlight of the Arrowverse, and I'm really excited by the possibility of seeing her as her own character and not as so much an extension of Oliver Queen's storyline. And so there is so much potential with that show, both in regards of the established characters that they have and just more female representation in the Arrowverse and in the superhero TV landscape, because there is not enough at all. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting possibilities for them to take the show forward if they decide to go forward with it.
The last one up is Stargirl. I don't even know, it's an Arrowverse show kind of because it's on the CW, but not really an Arrowverse show yet because it was supposed to be on DC Universe. So is it in that timeline? Who knows? It's on the CW. It's a great show. Where is it going to go? Where is it going to go next, Nicole?
Well, honestly, there's a lot of directions it can go yet. We haven't yet seen the season 1 finale, so we can't really tell you where it's going to go yet. That said, to describe the show as Arrowverse-ish would be correct. Crisis on Infinite Earths kind of established that it's placed on Earth 2, which is why you kind of get a slightly modern retro vibe, and it looks very different, but you still have all these iterations of familiar characters popping up in background and part of the story. So I would say that there is a real possibility that once the good folks on Earth Prime realize that, oh, wait, the multiverse didn't die and it are still out there, we have a real possibility that potentially now with the show being just the CW's property going into season 2, we may actually get to see some fun crossover. One of the things that has kind of popped up here and there is that the possibility of a crossover is not ruled out. In fact, Breck Basinger has actually said that, she would love to see a crossover between Stargirl and some of the other Arrowverse shows. I believe Supergirl in specific came up, but also The Flash, because they are tonally similar. That said, I don't think fans should necessarily get their hopes up for it yet. Stargirl is very unique. It is very interesting in the fact that it's a show that is not only family friendly, but it does something unique in that it shows real consequences to superhero activities. And how do the heroes deal with it in a way that helps them keep moving forward and keep learning? Because they're kids. They're definitely kids. So we've got different tones. So I think, realistically speaking, we're going to see Stargirl stay more in its same lane. That said, it wouldn't be a huge surprise if we saw some sort of brief interaction potentially with Black Lightning, just because they're filmed in the same geographical area.
Thanks for tuning in. We've got so much more on this show all weekend long as we cover Comic-Con. So make sure you keep it locked in. We'll see you there.